My name is Jill, Freedom, and Lilith. You are here at Road Culture Rules, and today I wanted to broach the subject of the spiritual side of the nomad life. I haven't talked a lot about that. It is kind of the reason I left to do this in the first place. So I thought I would just touch briefly on what it means to me, why it's such an important part of how I live and the choices I make, and see if it applies to you. So we're going to take one more deep breath for the road. No, wait a minute. We're at the very beginning. So that's going to do a deep breath in, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and see you on the other side. So Freedom, has this been a spiritual quest for you? Have you learned anything? Do you feel enlightened? Do you have more peace in your soul? Or are you just waiting till the next meal? Literally blinded by the light. One of the ways these videos get supported are by a few books that I've written, which have nothing to do with the videos themselves. They're based on what I've learned with 20 plus years as being a social worker. Why let it all go to waste, right? For anyone over 50 or a caretaker, this is stuff you just need to know. Not fun, but necessary. You'll find the link below. I will say thank you, and the more books I sell, the faster I'll be back on the road. So I haven't talked a lot about this, mostly because it's not really what I ever wanted this whole process to be about. And yet at the same time, I'm finding myself reflecting more on that aspect. And so when I talk about the spiritual side of a nomad's life, it really is the whole reason I left to do this in the first place. The people that were that I was looking at, I don't know if you're familiar with Peace Pilgrim. I think she was 47 when she took off and just started walking around the country to spread her message. And all she took with her was the clothes on her back, a comb, and a toothbrush. Now, I took a trailer because I had animals that I wanted to take with me. But a lot of my intention was the same type of life. And if you look at the lives of a lot of our greatest spiritual teachers or leaders, they have lived a nomadic lifestyle. If you look at what Jesus did, what Buddha did, what Confucius did, I don't know if Krishna did it all, but quite a few of the people who really have dived into the spiritual life have left their worldly life behind. And you know, one of the big reasons why I don't like talking about this stuff is that I don't want the conversation to be about what I believe and why, but I really wanted to have the conversation about how this life has facilitated this or that part of the journey. And the reason I did this in part was, I've told you about the physical stuff, the house, the change, to look for a new place to live. But it was also, for me, it was a test of what I call to walk in faith, because I didn't have a plan. I wanted to see if I could go out into the world without a plan and not really knowing how I would survive or make it, and to see what would happen. And what I learned was that in some way, I was always okay. I never really had anything terrible happen, or no problem that couldn't get fixed, or no solution. I used to make the joke, it was often as I was stepping into the unknown that the solution would find me, put its weight under my foot so I didn't fall down. But it's always just worked out, because people are just really good. And not because they feel sorry for you, but because I think our essence as human is that we have mostly an instinct for good. And that was, really a walk in faith, and it's one that I still practice, but we're changing the journey up a little bit these days. And so the things about this type of life that really facilitated or were part of what I wanted to learn about myself was, one, letting go of my stuff. The simpler you have out in the world, the more time and energy you have to devote to the inner journey. And for me, that's been primary since I was 14. I've always been chasing down what is the truth. It's always been about the inner journey, but we still have to go out into the world and find ourselves. And I think one of the things happens around the midpoint of your life, especially when your parental duties are starting to wind down, if you have them, is that you start to ask yourself the question, is there more? And one of the ways you can do that is to let go of a lot of the external so that you have more time and energy to put to the internal. And that may not be of interest or anything of value to other people. But if you have that internal drive, you'll absolutely know what I'm talking about. And this process does two things. One is it creates more challenge externally, which then requires to have a deeper trust and faith within yourself, both in your own internal capabilities of character, but also if you have a spiritual source that you look to, it helps facilitate that relationship. And also, what I've really come to believe is that the more out in nature you are, the more away you are from a lot of the urban aspects of electromagnetic frequencies and lots of people, lots of noises, lots of cement, things like that. That really makes it much more difficult. This has been very transformative for me. It's something I can't really describe because it doesn't look like that, but I don't really care because this has always been about what's going on within me and what I value the most. But I thought it would be a worthwhile conversation to have because things are happening that I'm revisiting that in a little bit of a different way. Now, some of the basics of this journey as a spiritual process have required me to focus on less what I do and more about who I want to be. And I've talked a lot about that in terms of podcasts. But what I've learned is that's not a conversation that people can really hear or relate to. And I think I see that also in the frustration that I'm not moving fast enough on some of the do projects, like getting the trailer done, getting moving, traveling, things like that. But those aren't my priority. My priority is the internal journey. And that doesn't make sense if that's not something that's important to you. But again, it's my journey, so I kind of focus on what's important to me. And in my worldview, in the end, when you look at what's temporary and what's eternal, my view is the stuff of the world, you can't take it with you. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, which is why I still focus on the survival stuff, because you can have all the spiritual seeking you want, but if you don't have food and shelter, it doesn't really mean anything. So to me, it's been a very interesting integration of very practical survival ideas with also a much deeper ability to review the introspective and the spiritual stuff. But I think it's put it to the test in a way that I hadn't expected. And I will tell you, when I left on this journey, I'd had a lot of time in my house to pursue my own internal work. When I got out on the road, it took me a couple years to get my feet back underneath me and then find that same kind of grounding. But see, that's what's really, to me, important about uncertainty and challenge and difficulty, not because you've failed in your spiritual seeking or your nomadic life, but it's those absolute uncertainties and challenges that make you so much more inside who you are. And so for me, this whole nomadic experience, even though I've been sedentary, the challenges have constantly been there. And so that to me has really provided the fodder for my own journey, the inside journey. And it became less about what I was doing out in the world. And it's always been, about the internal journey. It's just not one people are excited about talking about. The things that I've gotten from this process that may not be tangible or exciting or valuable to other people have been things like discipline, vigilance, commitment, patience, oh my gosh, faith, dealing with uncertainty, having to get along with people that maybe I wouldn't have ever chosen to get along with, dealing with challenges and crises that I hadn't dealt with before. So it's really challenged a lot of who I was, and I like who I've become. And that's part of, why I did it. And it's also part of why I'm continuing to do it, because I don't want the heaviness of that old life. I want to have more of a lightness so I can keep moving forward internally. It's not so important to me to move forward externally. And that doesn't jive with a lot of people. But I really wanted to talk about it today because it's something I've been thinking about. And I just wanted to share that for those of you who are looking at this type of lifestyle maybe through a slightly different lens than is most popular in terms about how far you can travel, how many places you can see, how many people you can meet. The biggest part of this journey is that it has allowed me to meet myself in a brand new way. And I don't think there's anything more valuable in that. I am a firm believer that who you are is more important than what you do. But that just gets into what I believe, which really isn't the point to all this. Other than this type of life, it really requires or it can require a much deeper version of introspection and understanding of yourself. The more challenges you can put yourself through, I think the stronger, more aware, and more you have to learn and grow and expand. And that's really what my journey is all about. It started as a walk in faith. It became so much more, and it will continue to evolve. So that's just a little bit today about how I see the nomadic life as a real facilitator for the spiritual side or the spiritual journey, if that's important to you. But before we go, we're going to just take one more deep breath for the road as I hope you rise with the sun in your eyes, love in your heart, feet firmly on the ground as together we walk on Survival Road, one step at a time. Live free, die wild, my friend. I will see you next time.
You might feel like you're running